Eggman Events Deck Builder just got upgraded. We now have user accounts with cloud saves, a new meta-analysis tool, unified our tournament database, as well as included Patreon perks such as ad-free viewing, wide mode for desktop users, as well as our new decklist comparison tool and unlimited cloud saves. So make sure to check it out and enjoy the video. Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and today we've got another week of power rankings for the OP16 meta of the One Piece card game. And honestly, this has been a pretty diverse meta. There's a lot of decks that are pretty good. I think there has been kind of like a top 5 leader kind of ranking that they've been kind of fighting with power with each other, but generally speaking, I think this format's pretty healthy and there's a lot of diversity as well. So if you guys are new to the channel, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe. We make a lot of content for the One Piece card game and you guys don't want to miss it. Then also, if you guys want deck lists for this week, many others, and tournament deck lists too, you can find them here on Eggman Events, which is linked in the description. We do a lot of work. Also, make sure to check out the meta tab. This is one of our newer features, so it tracks all the decks that we have for a meta, and then it looks over like the deck. So if you want to see what an deck looks like and what cards are in there, you can see what people are doing ratio-wise. So for example, 50% of people are on Holy right now, essentially, and if you hit the start building, there's some you can get a core 48 of what people are usually running, and then you can use that to build your own deck stuff too. So make sure to check that out if you haven't already, and if you go to tournaments into OP16 into ranked, that is where you can find all the deck lists that we're going over today as well. So jumping into going to the power rankings, we do see this top 10 of Luffy, Teach, Nami, Enel, and Rosinante at the top 5. I think this has been pretty solid, all things considered. I think if you ask most people what the top 5 leaders are of the game, I think most people would say these 5 specifically, right? There is a bit of a higher win rate against Enel specifically. A lot of people are in green blue Luffy right now, right? Which generally tends to normalize the ratio a little bit, right? It's a deck that I think blue green Luffy has a lot of decision making too, but because of that too, if you're new to the deck, you can make some mistakes, and especially Teach. Teach also I think is a deck that's very specific on your decision making too, and you can kind of get a wrong play, and then because of that, can impact the rest of the game. So Enel does have the highest win rate next to Calgara, which we'll talk about a little bit though. So having a 53.8 is pretty high, and I do think that in the next week or so, especially with these new tournaments that we have this weekend around the world and in Toronto and Europe, I do think that Enel and likely Nami also get a little bit more resurgence from where the previous week too. Looking at the bottom 5, we've got Calgara, Lucy, Boa, Yamato, and Ace. And I don't think these are the only decks that could be in the top 10 of the power rankings. We've seen a good amount of cycling. And it is interesting to see Calgara up so high. Now, it is a lower played leader for the set, right? Because we only have 2,000 or so games for it. Also to consider, it did get a top in the pure regionals last weekend too. So it is a deck though now a lot of people are trying to make work. I do think that specifically Wiper ends up being a really solid card against a lot of decks right now too. And I think that is pretty impactful. So other than that, here are the decks. We're going to go over the top placing one for each leader in a little bit, but we're going to look at the matchup chart real quick. And if you guys want to see a more interactive and full matchup chart, you can check out TCG Matchmaking. Again, link to their Patreons in the description. Lets you kind of unlock this in the OP Bounty app, and it's really, really helpful. So highly recommend it. So we got the green blue Luffy though, very good into essentially the new wave of decks, right? Teach, Rosinante, and then a tough matchup into specifically Nami and Enel. Because of that too, I think a lot of people kind of slept on green blue Luffy a little bit going into the first weekend of regionals. So I do expect to see more and more people on Nami and Enel in particular. And then we've got Teach, which is the opposite, right? It has a lot of bad matchups into, again, the newer stuff. It has a bad matchup into Luffy, into Rosinante, into Yamato, even a bad matchup into Lucy, but it does have a good matchup into specifically Nami and Enel, which is pretty helpful. We've got Nami, which is pretty much good across the board. Only bad matchups are essentially Teach and Lucy, which are pretty abysmal, to say that lightly. We also do have the Enel here too. So this being, a pretty standard deck that a lot of people are playing, right? The only tough matchups are Nami and Teach, these yellow decks, right? We also have Boa, Hancock. So any deck that's able to kind of recur their life and kind of outstarve Enel, I think is a good matchup for, the yellow decks, right? And then a tough matchup for Enel, which is pretty standard. Rosie, I think, has been quote unquote one of the more fair decks in the meta right now, in the sense that it is pretty any matchup that it can play, I think, is pretty solid for it. I think its worst matchup is Enel with a 36% win rate, but it's not impossible. It's just a matchup that you have to really make sure you know what you're doing. And I think honestly, it's more of a dice roll matchup than anything. If you go first as Rosie, I think you have a really good chance to stabilize, and especially if you see your curve. But and again, I do think Anel is like a really tough matchup for you in general. Then we got the Yamato, which I think this one I think has been getting a little bit worse every week, right? Having a bad matchup into Nami, Anel, and Rosinante is really tough. You have a 50-50 matchup into Green Blue Luffy, and then your only like real good matchup is against Teach, right? So I think like if you need to be round, you do have to have a good matchup into Luffy. Like of the top 5 deck lists that we've been talking about, you do kind of have to have a little bit of a stronger matchup into those. And if you are a little bit weaker into like 2 or more of those, then that's a little bit cause for concern. So and then we got Lucy, who has a really good matchup into Nami and Teach. You do have a tough-ish matchup against Luffy, and then the Enel matchup still very abysmal, a 27% win rate, which is pretty tough. And then like just a minus matchup to Rosinante. So especially like against a lot of these yellow decks, I think Lucy can be fine, but it is a little bit tough there. We also do have like a little bit of the red ace, which I've been a little bit, I will say, coping on a little bit. It does, Green Blue Luffy being a good matchup is nice. I think Teach is about 50-50. And then Nami is winnable. Having a bad matchup into Rosie and Enel, though, is pretty tough. And I do think more and more people are going to be slowly going back to Enel in the next couple weeks. So if that's something that I think Ace needs to be viable for, you need to find a way to, have some consistent matchups against those decks specifically. But you do have some good variety against also Yamato, as well as, just a minus matchup a little bit against Lucy. We also do have the Boa here, which, I know a lot of people have been playing Nami with the same color and pretty much a similar package, but you do have a good matchup into pretty much everything that's not Yellow Teach, right? Like Nami's like a little bit negative, and like Green Blue Luffy's not our favorite, and I think we're fine with that. But honestly, being able to be like a gatekeeper in the format, like look how green this line is after you get to Nami with Boa. I think that's something that's pretty attractive for the deck there too. We've got Ace. Tough matchups are Teach specifically, and Nell's not our favorite, and then Lucy's not our favorite either, and Boa. So it's really like Ace also kind of has the same issue where the matchups that it's good against are very good, and the matchups you're bad against you're very bad. So it's a little bit tough to kind of handle there. We also have Shanks, which I think has been seeing less and less play, but did get some tops in Mexico, which happened last weekend too. So if you want to check out the deck list from that one, having a good matchup into Nami or an even matchup against Nami and Nell is fine. It's kind of like Rosinante, right? Nothing matchup-wise is like truly heinous, but you're never like it's like a bunch of 50-50s, right? And then lastly, Kalgara, we do have a bad matchup into Nami. We have, I would say, evenish against Enel. It's a little bit negative, but evenish, and then Yamato. So honestly speaking, like looking at the matchups for Kalgara, they are pretty attractive, and I think it's something that you could spend a lot of time into, and it could be well enough to counter a lot of these other decks. But I think the only thing that's against it too is that not a lot of people are on it. So the people who are on it have to be super good, but I think that can be possible as well. So those are the stats again. If you want to see a more interactive chart and look at more stats, you can make sure to find them on the OP Bounty app and make sure to subscribe to the TCG matchmaking Patreon there. All right, to finalize this video, we're going to go over a couple deck lists, one for every leader in the top 10 here. So let me just resume this. I didn't mention it. We're still on the road. This will probably be my last recorded video before heading back to LA, but I do apologize for any issues with the quality of this video and stuff. But we're going to go over the highest win rate deck for each one of these leaders, starting off with Luffy. And I think this has been pretty standard for the deck. I've been seeing a lot of people originally playing one copy of Brook, and the more and more I see this card, I think 2 copies just makes way more sense. The fact that you can also just pop it so then you can get your leader ability back is nice. The fact that it gets to rest something, like it's essentially a card with Rush in this deck, and when you essentially get 12 Dawn a turn, and this essentially only costs 4 Dawn, I think that's something that ends up being pretty strong, especially like if you set up a Mr. 3 Galdino beforehand, so like you can play out the Brook, use the Mr. 3 Galdino to give Dawn to something, and then you can pop it afterwards to restand even the Galdino, and then just tap it again. That ends up being pretty good. So I think more and more people are playing our Mr. 3 Galdino on this one. I have been seeing a little bit more of this Mr. 3 as well, so if your leader's in Pill Down, you can rest something with a cost of 5 or less, which, spoilers, that's a lot of blockers in this, and when you already just get 2 Dawn back on your, like this is essentially 0 Dawn if you weren't playing, if you're just trying to go for game, right? You know what I mean? Like this ends up being, I think, a pretty good target, and even like in like the mirror match or like early game, this can offer some really good removal. So I have been seeing less and less people on like the specifically like Luna, right? There's no Luna in this, but there's like one copy of the Dead Man's Game, one copy of I Know You're Strong. So I think those are fine. I do like the additions of the Crocodile. It has been interesting to see less and less people on the Emporio, but generally speaking, I think the Crocodile is just better, a better version of Emporio when it hits the board. So that kind of makes sense for me, and then just kind of the rest of the deck from here. So honestly, I'm looking forward to seeing if there's any additional text for Green Blue Luffy, because I still think like the ways that people are building are a little bit vanilla at times, and I think that you do have to stick to the archetype a little bit, but there are some alternative ways to like find some ways to I don't know use card like again like the Brook in the deck I think is really interesting. So anyways, here's the build here for Green and Blue Luffy. Next up, we got Teach, and there has been like a lot of different builds I've been seeing, and honestly, like with Yellow being like such a strong color right now in the game, having like a really wide card pool, and the fact that Teach is really just restricted on like if you have a card with trigger, it's never really dead in your hand, right? It doesn't have to be like a Marshall the Teach or a Blackbeard Pirates with trigger or anything, just any card with a trigger. So with that in mind, I think there are some great ways for you to be able to mess with these. There's also the Wiper here, which being able to give you some board wipe potential against matchups such as like Ace, or not Ace, Enel or Luffy. Like those two, I think are very prevalent matchups. So I think that's something that's very strong for this Wiper inclusion. I've been seeing a lot of yellow decks try to find their way to include this card as well. No copies of Borsalino, which I'm a little bit surprised of. I would kind of consider Borsalino still a pretty relevant card. I've been trying with and without it, and honestly speaking, I'd say that is a card that I would be more likely to run than not, but it is okay. I have personally been kind of walked away from running the one drop Lafitte, and I do think there are some other better cards or situations for it. But if you want to run that card, I don't think it's necessarily wrong. It's just been something I've been seeing less and less of. We have 3 copies of the Zahahaha, which I think is still good. I'd probably play 3 copies. The only reason I play 2 is if we do play the Black Hole, which will let you like recur it afterwards too, because I do think you do need to see, generally speaking, I think you need to resolve this twice against some matchups. So being able to do that by running 3 copies, I think is pretty solid. And then just kind of, I would say, more standard stuff from there. So generally speaking, I think this deck is still in a really good spot. There has been really cool adaptations. And again, there's so much room for like tech choices in this deck that if you want to do well with this deck, I think you have to play it a lot and then pick the pieces that you think are the most relevant. So here's the build here for the Teach, and the next up you've got Nami, and Nami's been like adapting a little bit as well, right? I have been seeing most people play a copy or 2 Gravity Blade, Raging Tiger, which I think this is a really good card against a lot of decks, but also just the fact that you can set it up with Teach pretty easily if it's in the top. Like, I would not play Gravity Blade without playing a copy or 2 of Teach, if I'm being super honest. I think this card is just super good and helpful in those situations. We are playing, again, pretty much the standard stuff. We do have like the Mr. 3, which this has been pretty close to a blue staple, I think, moving forward. A lot of decks have been using this. The fact that it is just such a good way to get out of an attack and also just draw 2 for 4 ends up being very handy, no matter what deck you're in. We are playing 1 copy of Marco and 1 copy of Zoro, so you can play them off of the Gecko Moria. Essentially, both these cards will offer us a get out of jail free card if they're hitting into life at times. We are playing Wipers, mentioned previously. This is really good against aggro decks because this can be a pseudo board wipe against decks such as the Luffy and everything. So yeah, I think that's going to be good. And then just kind of the rest of it, which I also like this 5-drop Luffy. It's very good against blocker decks, which can be good also against just specifically Purple Enel because they play events like every turn, and you get to really bump your Luffy up pretty heavily if you're able to do that. So other than that, I think this deck is in a really good spot. I think Nami's still like arguably best deck in format. I still think like it's either Nami or Nell, if I'm being honest. And yeah, Nami is really strong because it's just such a generic leader. And then when yellow and blue got like generically good cards, Nami can really take advantage of them. So here is the build here for Nami. And then next up with now, we've pretty much seen it pretty often, right? We know what these lists look like. Not really any like card pool changes with OP16, just a little bit of ratio changes, which I think most people are playing 3 or 4 copies of Varie, which was not really the case beforehand, I think, at least not until like the end of OP15. There has been more and more people I've been seeing playing like the 2K Sanji kind of sneaking in the deck here and there. I do think that, this is still a very aggressive deck where I'm not a holy believer. I'd play more blockers. Like again, Frankie's been a really solid card for the deck, as well as the Law and the Reiju. All these have been very good. I have been seeing people play less and less copy of Senior Pink. Usually, one or two max, but sometimes they're not even including it, which I thought was interesting. Not necessarily wrong, just an interesting observation I've had. There is also the 6-drop now, which generally people who play this at like one copy. There are a lot of games where if even though this deck has so much card draw and cycle, you're not guaranteed to see this 6-drop on curve. So even if you have like a mediocre 6-drop, like the fact that this is just like a 10k beat stick after the turn you play it is the more important kind of effect for it. So, and the fact that you can, like, sometimes you need to just lose all your Dawn at the end of the game. So this can help you do that to be able to get like your bigger attacks. So not much more. You guys know how a nail works. You know what it is. Let's move on to the next one. All right, next up we've got Rosinante to finish up the top 5 here. And so I've been really liking this deck. I've been really liking Purple Navy stuff. The Sakazuki is one of my favorite cards in the game right now. So with all that in mind, I do think that there are some cool things that you get to do with this deck specifically. It's less of a law deck, right? You do have to run like a little bit of a law package just to get leader effect viability. But really the all-stars for the game are the Borsellino, the Rosinante Law, and Sakazuki, which this is technically a Trafalgar Law. But, the Navy side has been really the practical part of this deck. So honestly, this is pretty similar to a build that I've been running and have sleeved up with me right now. I think the only difference is that I still am like a believer for like one copy of the Secret Rare Law, just because sometimes the rush attack is important, and like the Rosie Law being able to recur ends up being pretty good. We do have copies of the I Love You, which again is searchable off the Kobe. I think Marineford also, not only is this like a really good cycle, but then the fact that there are times where you need to get some additional Dawn -1, just so you have additional Dawn to bring back with Sakazuki. So with leader effect and the Marineford, being able to use 2 Dawn minuses effects in the same turn means that you can actively make sure that you have Dawn in your Dawn deck to bring it back with the Sakazuki, which is nice. So other than that, I think this deck is pretty good. I don't have much to say. It's pretty understood with the packages, but there are a lot of tech choices. But I would say, honestly, like this is a really good starting package where if you have not played this deck at all, this is a very, very solid 50 to start off, and then you can make your decisions from there. So here's the build there. All right, next up we got Calgara. Again, this one's been seeing a little bit more play and a little bit more success than I would say people would be imagining at some point, right? Again, I do think that Wiper ends up just being a very solid card against a lot of matchups currently. So having that in archetype and getting kind of the quote-unquote full effect from it by being a Sky Island leader ends up being pretty important there. We do have copies of like the Upper Yard and Earth Won't Lose package, which is pretty good. And then honestly, it's just like the rest of this, like being able to use like the yellow good stuff, right? We do have like the new 3-drop Calgara from OP15, which if it's able to find your things, right, you are able to discard 1 to draw 2. The fact that it's also named Calgara means that you do get the Mont Blanc Noland effect to be able to get the extra heal if you need to. The 5-drop Calgara from 12 has also just been continued a good card, and then just kind of the rest of the deck as well. So it is interesting to see like the 3.5 is just like another aggressive card that we can put in the deck. Just to have like something you can play on 3 to kind of fill out your curve. We are playing the Nami 2K Searcher. We're not playing the Shura, which is a little interesting, but I think that's fine. And I think the only thing that I don't like about this deck is like just how particular some of the searches are, right? This only looks for Sky Island, which is fine. But then we have Calgara, which looks for the Warrior R, specifically Noland, right, which is a tough one. And then we have Wiper, which looks only for Upper Yard. And then like there's like so many times where like this also can only find Upper Yard or Warrior, right? So like that ends up being like kind of weird what the balance is. But again, we do get to take advantage of Borsellino, Nami, and the 5-drop Luffy, which does help this deck be, I think, very relevant against a lot of matchups right now. So here's the build here for Calgara. We also do have Lucy. Lucy ended up getting first place this past weekend in Peoria, and second place the previous weekend in OP15 for Los Angeles. So it's been I would say weirdly relevant how good Lucy's been at the end of OP15 and at the beginning of OP16, right? We did look at the matchup chart, so there are some pretty good matchups for it. It didn't get any direct support for this meta. I could see people playing Mr. 3 in this deck because it is generically a good card. I think the only issue with it is that like specifically like 7-drop Sabo and you can't play on the same turn, right? Which is a little bit tough to justify in that side. But the fact that you do have access to cards like the Cavendish, which ends up being pretty good, and the Viola and the rest of it, I think all that is pretty solid for the deck. We do have, the rest of like the general package. There has been like, do we play the Follow Me and I Will Guide You? You have the Bale Betty, which this has been, I think most people playing like 1 or 2 copies. Generally, it is the card that can whiff the most because just looking at our stats, right, the Revolution Army cards are only 22, which 2 of them include the Bale Betty, right, and that is a little bit tougher. So we do have to run a little bit more. This also, this is just a Dressrosa card, right? We do have like the Fire Fist, which is Revolution Army, but all in all, I think this deck is in an okay spot, right? It's just something that you do lose out on a little bit of the power from it. I think just because you do have like some tougher matchups and the fact that you are a little bit inflexible compared to other decks because of just how much you have to run these cards. So not much more to say, but here's the build here for Lucy. Next up, we've got Boa, which this deck's obnoxious. I'll say it. I do think that this has like the ceiling to be more obnoxious than Nami, just because like it puts you in like so many situations of like, what do I do? Like, do I attack board and I lose life? Do I attack into their life? Like, there's just so many times where I'm just like, man, they just get to slowly burn me throughout the game, be really defensive, not just kind of like stare at me, and then at the end of the game, they're just able to push for game with it, right? We are able to take advantage of like the Teach, which this is a 7 Warlords card too, but that doesn't really impact anything in this deck because we don't really have any searchers for it. We are also playing like the Kuma as well, so Moria, Teach, and Boa Hancock running a good amount of these Warlord cards, right? We're playing 4 copies of Zora, we're playing 4 copies of the Glorioso, being able to use that to put a card to the top of our life, which can include the Teach, or it can include the Gecko Moria, which we're only playing to play out literally just Zoro or Boa Hancock, which is fine because we still get to draw a card for free, and then we get a blocker, and then like Boa off of Moria is pretty nasty because then even if you didn't have Dawn underneath your leader, Boa will put the Dawn on your leader defensively, and then you also get to look at the top 3 and then rearrange it, which can also be good for not only your draw next turn, but if you know you're healing next turn too, you can essentially get like a mini Teach effect from it, which all that ends up just being very, very good. Even like Boa Hancock in the Kuma, being able to know which card of the top 3 you're healing ends up being pretty nice. So lastly, we do have Boa Marigold, right? This card does gain blocker, and you can play it off your life and triggers your leader effect to burn the damage too. So all in all, like there's just so many good cards that this deck gets to run. And if especially if your opponent's not used to playing against this deck, they can just find themselves at 0 life against a full board on the other side. And that's really, really tough to contend with. So I don't have much more to say about this deck, but it's super good right now, I think, in comparison to where it was at the end of OP15. And the Boa's really, the Marigold's really been helpful for it. So there it is there. All right, 2 more decks. We got Yamato. Yamato's been pretty, I think, static when it comes to deck building. There has been a couple choice adds, though, with the Rebecca. I think most people are playing at least, 2 or 3 copies of this now. Just the fact that it does offer like a way to like add 1 more blocker, kind of like the combo with the Shinobu and the Momo. So if you're at 9 Dawn, which you have to be at 9 Dawn to be able to use this effect anyways, what you can do is you can play Momo for 5, use it to play it on the board, and then for 4 play Rebecca. Rebecca's effect can get anything that's 3 to 7 from your trash, and then you can play the Shinobu that's already in your hand for free. And then once you do, you can use its on-play effect to trash it, do the Momo combo. And so essentially your end board from 0 cards on board ends up being 2 blockers, 1 with Momo, Rebecca, and then 1 of your 8Ks from this one as well. It is also interesting to see the 7-drop Luffy in this deck too. So being able to be a 7K defensively is important in some matchups. So I think that's a valid choice for it. And then being able to have like this additional powerhouse on the deck as well. So other than that, though, I think this deck has been a little bit linear, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It's just a very good deck at doing what it does. And again, also, it's a pretty cheap deck, all things considered. It's under $100, and most of that money goes into the ground death as well. So, which is a nice card to have, but not a need to have. So, if you want to try to play this game, I still think that Yamato is like one of the best decks to do so. So not much more to say, but here is the build here. And to wrap it up, we do have the red and blue ace. And I've been trying, to make a lot of ace decks work, including this one. Being able to play Mr. 3 in this build, I think, is really handy because, again, it is a pretty strong card in this format. And there are some matchups where you can just play it out for 4 on curve and not need to pop it immediately. And then you can still get some value from it that way as well. So other than that, though, Ace has been pretty solid. I'm actually really surprised, though, like it hasn't been as popular in this format. It's something that's been essentially viable since release in OP13 almost a year ago, and it got some more support, not only like the indirect support from Mr. 3, but The Moby Dick ends up being, I think, really important too. The fact that it lets you get some Dawn flexibility, the fact that it's another searcher that looks for sincerely any card in your deck, I think ends up being really, really impactful for those reasons too. And it helps out the deck a lot. I'm also kind of surprised, maybe not like super surprised, but I do think that the like the 4-drop Luffy from this could be really helpful, since it is a card that lets you just play it out for 2, right? And then, I mean, making your leader a 7K is like a little bit less important, but it is something that you can get that additional power, which I think is interesting for the deck as well. So other than that, though, I think Ace is still like in a good spot. If you've been playing it for the last year, you can continue to play it. There are some adaptations you have to do, and you do have to get your Mr. 3s, but it is a deck that I think is in a good spot. So other than that, though, that's going to be it for this one. Again, if you guys want to see any more of these decks, data, or otherwise, make sure to check out my website, Eggman Events, which is linked in the description. If you guys are going to be playing in Toronto or anywhere for any event this weekend, let me know. I'd love to cheer you on, and looking forward to the results as well. So that's going to be it for me. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you all next time.